crowd, and everyone left, and then, thanks for coming.
We're all taking a nap now. What's that?
Where can you do that?
Encryption stuff?
Oh, that place right there? Take a nap.
That's like one share of the sand.
So, we're here to talk about content security policy. Who has heard of XSS? Okay, so no one's heard of any of these questions. Who has heard of content security policy? Or who has done any meaningful work with content security policy?
Those are
Pretty much what I expected. As Matt sort of alluded to, I think this is like the greatest thing since, well actually it's content misaligned. So let me step back a second. I'm Neil, I'm on Twitter AppSec team. There you go.
Hey, could you volume up for some of the
Oh, is that a problem? I can definitely put on the mic too.
I couldn't hear you also.
Let me know if I'm mumbling for sure.
Okay.
If you can't hear what I'm saying, you might as well just get
Stop mumbling.
If only we had a device.
So this is the part where like people drop their about me slide, or if you're like Moxie, you tell a really cool story, get the crowd going, but like I'm pretty lame, I don't have very many stories. But I do have a husky. So, I mean, if that doesn't get you in a good mood, we can't be friends. What is CSP? As I was going to allude, what I was going to say before is it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, and it's our savior in a world full of XSS. It's actually big enough to, people put the letters on a shield logo and make a big deal out of it. Then these really weird guys get sweaters with CSP for life, like embroidered on their shoulder. It gets a little crazy.
Do you have one of those sweaters?
I'm the guy with that sweater. So should you apply CSP? And this is like a presentation, so I'm just going to tell you what you do. I don't care what you think. Should you apply CSP? Some people have called this the Matatall axiom or whatever the right term for it is, but it is absolutely negligent to write a new web application with any significant functionality at all without applying CSP from day one. Why? Because again, it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And if you try to go and retrofit a website with CSP, you're going to want to shoot yourself. Before actually explaining anything about content security policy, I'm just going to drop some actual header values and what they actually do. So this is absolutely unrealistic. Nobody in the world could actually use this except for one of my demo pages. But what does this accomplish? XSS is killed. You cannot have XSS, no reflected, no stored, no DOM, no MXSS, or mutation XSS. You've disabled Flash because Flash sucks, and any modern browser that can support CSP doesn't need Flash. Mixed content. When we're talking about you're on an SSL page and you load a resource over HTTP, it'll break your lock up in the top, it'll become yellow, you get a bunch of console warnings. Newer browsers will actually not allow the content to load in the first place, so you can't be lazy anymore if your site will be really broken. And third-party content is not allowed. If someone has an XSS on your site, they might change your home page to like a picture of Goatsy or something. You can do really nasty things in someone's website if you write XSS. So a more common one here, I'm going to sort of explain what these do along the way now. But just sort of this policy is more realistic, and guess what? All the same protection. You're going to see this on a lot of Twitter sites. This is pretty much the default policy we use. Now what does this say? Default source. Default source applies when you don't define any of the other following sources. So anything that's not defined will get that value. What does self mean? Self means same origin. What does same origin mean? The protocol, the host, and the port have to match for this resource to be loaded. And what we're building is a whitelist of things you can do, which are lots of things you can't do. Image source, where can you load pictures from? Well, you load from your CDN and you can make sure it's always HTTPS. Object source none, that's when you kill Flash, you kill Java applets, you kill a few other things that nobody should be using. Script source, can anyone guess what that means? That's where you load your JavaScript from. Again, you probably have a CDN, unless you're serving it yourself. And style source, style sheets, style attributes, that sort of thing. Now, back in the real world, where CSP is sort of done but not complete, this sort of changes a little bit. If you notice in the script source value, there's now this thing called unsafe inline. This allows inline JavaScript. This is the feature that allows you to let people XSS you. Notice how it says unsafe inline. You are declaring you are doing something unsafe. This is embarrassing. Same thing for style source, unsafe inline. You're thinking CSS is an XSS. What the hell does that have to do with anything? Well, Dr. Mario, again, who's also one of my heroes, a few years ago came up with this talk called Stealing the Pie Without Touching the Sill, where he can extract data from a page using CSS. Uses a lot of transformation and tiny basic tags, some of the stuff that Matt talked about. But that was sort of his way of XSSing a site without JavaScript.
And that covers Flash too?
Flash is an object source, so as you can see, I've allowed Flash by the default source value is now in the object source value, which was none, and now is self. So unfortunately, we allow Flash at this point. Which you don't need to, because again, any browser that supports CSP doesn't need Flash. So we've already lost two of our biggest protections right there. This is an absolutely useless policy. This is what you are applying to your site if you don't apply CSP. Allow everything. And while you're doing it, let me put inline script. Let me use the eval function, another common sync for XSS. Basically, let me do whatever I want because I want to let people XSS me. I want people to do Flash things. I want to allow mixed content. I don't care about the users or my site even. Now this is a crazy policy. Can anyone guess where this is? It's impossible, but unless you haven't seen this, this is Gmail's policy. They've listed out self, a ton of resources. They've allowed inline script, they've allowed eval, but most importantly, they didn't set a default source. Now the default source is the default value. The default value for default source is star. So they're allowing star of everything else. What's that? I mean, laughing is kind of my reaction, but again, it's not a trivial task. And I'm going to make it so this becomes less scary, hopefully. So what is CSP actually? CSP is a response header. You make a request, you have some headers there, you get a response. These headers allow you to sort of change the behavior of the browser itself. So by setting a set of directives, you are telling the browser what it is allowed to do and what it is not allowed to do. That is the most important thing to understand. But how does it accomplish these things? Limit where your resources are loaded from. Remember, we whitelisted self. We whitelisted our CDN. We don't want to whitelist the internet. Enable or disable the use of eval. You turn it on or off, whether the presence of that string is there. Eval is bad. There's no reason to use it. People say it's faster than parsing JSON. Well, I think as soon as you get your first XSS, that argument's already out the window. You can enable or disable inline JavaScript. I'll get into this a little more, but that is the feature that allows cross-site scripting. Beyond loading a JavaScript file from the internet anywhere. And enable or disable inline CSS. Now, what is inline JavaScript? What does that actually mean? Inline event handlers on clicks, on errors, whatever. JavaScript URIs, a link that starts with JavaScript : everything after that is JavaScript that will execute when you click. Something that's omitted from here is you can do the same thing with the data URI. And then just plain old content between the script tag. We're not talking about script source and equals. We're talking about inside script tag blocks. So this is like the fundamental problem with XSS. How the heck would the browser know which one of these scripts is legitimate, if not both? It just does what the web application tells it to do. The web application is really nothing but a big giant string concatenation. And so, again, it's just blindly executing these things. Now, take this little block of code. Now consider doing this. Now remember I said we can whitelist where we load our host from. So let's just say that our policy said load from self. Relative URL is definitely going to be on the same origin. And now the script tag here is still there. But if I said there should be no inline script, go ahead and load JavaScript from our server, the browser can now make an intelligent decision that this is actually bad, beyond the fact that it says bad stuff. So when it comes to cross-site scripting, this is probably like one of the most basic examples. We just put a little JavaScript, pull it out to another file, and now the browser knows. Does that part make sense? Just some features of CSP that can help you use to implement. CSP has built-in reporting. Every violation that occurs generates an event that then triggers a post request that goes back to the URL you specified. You can collect these reports and do big data on them and really learn a lot of information from it. CSP has report-only mode, so you can put CSP on your site without actually affecting anything. It'll generate the violations as if it was enforced, but your users aren't sitting there with a broken website. And something that's very important but I've yet to actually leverage is, let's say you get a header in production, and it might be too permissive, but you know what? Any header is better than no header. You can set a second header that's doing report only that's different, so you can test out if you're trying to tighten things up a little. You can do so while not losing the security of content security policy and being able to tune it without affecting your users. I've never used it, but it seems super important. So this is where we'll go through. I gave the 2-second version of what CSP is. We'll talk about how you can actually apply the header. I mean, I know that sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but it's not trivial. How to manage the reports that I talked about, and then just sort of a strategy at the end, how you can sort of do this successfully. One caveat, Twitter.com does not have CSP enforcing inline JavaScript right now, so I'm actually talking out of my ass in some sense. I have done this on just about every subdomain of Twitter, so I hope that gives me some street cred here. And I'll talk about that more later. So some things you want to remember when doing CSP. This is like one of the most no-brainer things that always gets overlooked. Apply CSP in every environment. We want development, tests, staging, and production as close as possible to being identical. Plus, if you apply it to every environment besides production, you might actually catch things before they get to production. What a novel concept. Use your employees as beta testers. If you have a product that's a website that your employees use, who cares if it's broken for them? They can actually go in and fix these things. So go ahead and piss off your fellow coworkers. And lastly, have a safety valve. What do I mean by this? CSP breaks things if you don't do it right. People don't like when things get broken. You need to have a quick way to sort of recover from this. The easiest way, of course, is switching from enforcing to report only. You're done, you can go home. But you don't want to wake people up in the middle of the night to have to deploy them, because you want them to safety valve. You just flip the switch and be done. I'll show an example of how that's done later. You don't just go and start submitting change lists or pull requests to people's repos. You talk to them, you work it out with them. But maybe you want to make sure you're not hitting a moving target. If you're trying to apply CSP and people are just, let's load more third-party content, let's throw more JavaScript in there, it's not going to happen. You can't hit that moving target. So make sure that no inline JavaScript is introduced. How do you do this? We have a grep script, a very complicated tool in this grep. Now, every time that a change comes in, we grep for a certain string. If it matches, we get added to that review automatically. A little note says, hey, looks like you're doing inline JavaScript. That's bad, right? This has been the most effective tool to sort of not making this a 10-year project. Similarly, make sure that you don't start introducing more third-party hosts. I don't have a good answer for this one. Maybe there's a regex that would work, I doubt it. But we have a very code review culture, code review heavy culture, so sort of crowdsource that enforcement, I guess. And set realistic expectations. You don't want to just go for the goal right away, probably. With a small site, you might be able to. But usually you're going to want to do things in increments. First, you disable Flash. Then you disable mixed content. Then you stop loading stuff from third-party hosts. And then you stop serving inline JavaScript. All 4 of those things can be done in increments. They can be done all at once. But definitely work with the team who owns the application, as opposed to just hey, you do this, and here's the code that does that. First thing you're going to do, you're going to visit your site. You're going to apply CSP on the client side. Casper Enforcer is really new. I love it. It allows you to set a CSP policy for any page you're on. So you can now, hey, I have a website. Let me just go load up my website. Oh, a bunch of violations. Change it. You don't even have to go to the server. You don't have to change any code. This is all done. You can deliver a policy without having to even talk to a team or have access to the code. User CSP is the Firefox version. Don't Google User CSP because they get a version that doesn't work. If you go to GitHub, that actually works.
Do those migrate sites, or do you just have it on the same page at a time?
You can have a single page at a time. One thing that's actually pretty nice about CSP is if your home page loads, the rest of your site's probably going to load. You might have like things that are like deep, dark in corners and might do some crazy stuff, but chances are you're already 90% of the way there. I would say 80, but I'll say 90. So how do we apply CSP? It's HTTP response header. It's super neat if you can set a response header, right? Well, you can set it in Apache and be done with it, or you can set it in Nginx. But that's actually not how things happen in real life. First, you're going to have to write some code. You might be able to get paid with a static policy, probably not. But really, you want to provide a library. Like, we need to stop thinking about CSP and HSTS and all these things as headers and think of them as configuration values and those checkboxes there. Think about it that way. We provide a library that instead of thinking of things as response headers and as configuration objects, developers are much more happy about that because they actually understand what's going on. So here's some shitty code. This is, I believe, translate.twitter.com CSP. Doesn't allow you to like JavaScript. Has a little feature toggle thing. These things are very popular in the DevOps. This is where you just change a value, and now we will no longer enforce CSP. So this is sort of like, I think, the most naive way of doing it beyond Apache files or htaccess, whatever. Does that look a little bit better? Is this something that makes a lot more sense? Remember I talked about the different directives, default source, frame source, script source. We have this lambda function that will run every time to determine if the header should be applied. And this is 9 lines of code as opposed to like a giant string of 4 lines of code. This allows us to look in a central common place to know what to look for when we want to configure. We don't have to search for response.header set calls or like search all over the application or check the web server layer. It's all right here within the app. It's very concise. So again, which one looks better? Now, there are a ton of libraries to do this these days. Helmet for Node, I think this was actually the first one. Secure headers is the Rails one that Twitter wrote. Highlines for Java, I mean, you can read here. Just know that there's probably a library available for everyone. Do I really need a library? Should you need a library? No. Again, this is a configuration problem, not a security problem, not a code problem. This is basically what we should put on every single web framework's like landing marketing page. Guess what, guys? We let you XSS and do all these things by default because you want that, maybe, probably not. CSP level 2, yeah, we're talking about level 2, next level shit. And it's your best friend. I don't know if you have a best friend already, but it's probably a good candidate for your next friend. CSP level 2 case study on twitter.com. We fought for 2 years to try to remove the inline JavaScript. We lost almost every battle. We did this crazy thing where we started doing some mutual exclusive stuff, like, oh, if it had to be inline, we'll do it. If it doesn't have to be inline, we'll switch it out. We'll have it kind of a number that we just flip it back and forth every time. Waste of time, way too much work, not worth it. Script nonce, which I'll talk about in a little bit, it says 2 weeks, but the code effort was actually 1 day. It doesn't include building the nonce support into the library. It includes implementing nonce with the library on twitter.com. 9-line code change, I believe. Pretty darn successful, except it hasn't actually shipped. So again, talk to me in a few weeks. I was hoping it would have shipped by now. Oh well. So what was I talking about? Nonce. What is a nonce? Nonce is just a random number. It's supposed to be used 1 time, also known as a random number. So we have this concept where we can now add this value to our script source directive, nonce dash some nonce. ones, ABC123. I just got really lucky with the random number generator, I promise. Now we add this extra attribute to the script tag. So it's nonce, ABC123, ABC123. Hey, I can run. Script tag, no nonce. Oh, this will never happen. So with just 10 bytes of the code change, you've now protected your site from cross-site scripting without removing all the underlying JavaScript, which has traditionally been the #1 reason why an organization would go, no, it's too hard. Well, can you add 10 bytes to your code?
What's generating and checking the nodes?
The library. So I think I have a slide that shows it. You just have like one configuration value. The nonce will be automatically set in your header. It will be available in your view. You can write a tag helper such that it even exists the nonce for you automatically. It's just a simple attribute put on your page.
Is it dynamic per request, or is it?
This is not a CS or F token. Definitely dynamic per request. The best part is you don't have any server-side state. The browser just knows it, so you don't need to verify the nonce on the server that the client-side code should execute. Very convenient, huh? Now, the second major feature of CSP Level 2 is hashes. You put the checksum code in the header. So, again, I don't know how this worked out to be ASDF, but notice I did not change any of the code here, and it has the same exact effect. Is this cool, or am I just like the only person who thinks this is amazing? I think I've had blog posts on this, like a video, we have a pull request that's a year old. We're really trying to work on this, but I'm convinced at least 3 other people at other companies that you can use script hash to automatically apply CSP to any app without any changes to your code. Sound like bullshit? Challenge me. So yeah, this is what I was talking about. So if you go back to the secure header library, all you do is type the word nonce in here, and now you have that nonce automatically generated for you and automatically populated on your pages as well. Now,
Is that in helmet yet?
what's that?
Is that in helmet yet?
I don't know of any other library that does this.
Okay, it's just
The Twitter internal library does it too. Same strategy, basically.
Rails up.
If you wanted to go implement that stuff yourself, it wouldn't be that hard, but adding the 5 bytes is pretty trivial. I mean, I would love it if all the other ones did too. Now, what about hashes? I kind of leaked it out of the bag. We're really looking at it. I use it on my personal blog because I threw in like JavaScript just to prove that this works, basically. And I should mention actually, CSP level 1 or level 2 is backwards compatible with CSP level 1. If you put a hash in your header, old browsers would be like, I don't know what this is, it's cool, I'll just allow everything. And new ones go, oh, there's a hash in your header. I should definitely not allow anything. And this is just a quick and easy script I use to just visit any one page on the world. And then you can generate all the script hashes for you. You just copy and paste that into your thing and you're done. So yeah, like I said, I think we're this close. It's another thing I really wish would have been done by this presentation. I swear I have something cool towards the end. And you have a monolithic app. You have a single code base. This is a giant Rails application, perhaps, that is a pain in the ass to work in. Well, if you do, like, I really feel your pain. This is not fun, especially when it's not your code, especially if you have to work with someone. It's this really back and forth process that sucks. I can't offer you any suggestions. Any suggestion I would ask or offer is probably what you're already thinking about. Maybe do it page by page, maybe per controller, maybe like per access level. Whatever works for you, I can't offer any help here. It just sucks. Service-oriented, your job just got a lot easier. Every time a new service comes up, you get these secure defaults. You know, that the second slide I showed you in the headers, that's our default policy. So we disallow all the crazy stuff by default. And we actually send out a log message to our centralized logging server every time we overwrite the default policy. There are absolutely legitimate reasons to it. Maybe your policy needs to allow a few more things, but we're going to know. What we also know, since we're all in the same framework of library, is we can now retro what policies are in the report-only mode, what policies allow inline JavaScript. Rather than searching through code, we have data and graphs. It's like, oh, a whole new bunch of our one application switched from enforcement to report only, and like a graph shoots up, and nobody's happy. All right, so now we're going to talk about CSP reports. Neil's axiom number 2 or whatever, if you're not analyzing your CSP reports, you won't be successful. What is in a CSP report? Did anyone read the Yelp blog that came out last week or this week?
Yeah.
Okay. You're going to notice a lot of overlap. I promise I wrote this before. This is a CSP report. It's a block JSON. Document URI. Where was I at when this violation was generated? What page am I on? Refer, you know what that is. Spelled correctly, by the way. Blocked URI. What did I try to do that was not allowed? I tried to load an image from people.example.com. And what violation, or what directive is violated? This image source self. Self is not people.example.com. There you go. What is not in a CSP report? Classification. What actually happened? Was it an inline script violation? Was it an inline style violation? Was it perhaps the use of eval? You know, maybe an online event or inline event handler. Maybe it was mixed content. Like, it just goes on and on. You can know this from looking at the report for the most part. Inline script violations get tricky, and I'll get into that later. Was this policy actually enforced? You don't know this just by looking at the CSP report. What application generated this report? Yeah, you have the URI, but if you're in a service or in architecture, you know, one slash changes the complete code base that you're using. So we use the very elite technique known as base 32 encoding, so you can't figure out what application is underneath it. Super elite. And the user agent. Was this Firefox? Was it Chrome? Very important to know. So this is all sort of, I mean, obviously the user agent is sent along with the request. All these other things you can sort of smuggle into your reporting endpoint. So remember I said that the reports are generated and it's sent to an endpoint you specify? Well, we just add a question mark and a variable name and a few things, and then you're sending this data with every request. And you know, obviously the report only version 4 stuff, I talked about how we graph and order. How do you classify a report? What the hell does it even mean? These are the different classifications. This is the different pseudocode that I use. Not very important unless you're about to implement this, but it is available on the blog as well. And these are kind of the 5 different things that you can possibly have. Script style, inline something, we don't know what it was. Probably because the person was using default source too broadly. They didn't specify something perhaps. And then this big long string right here, it determines that it's mixed content versus unauthorized host. Like, you know, this is my CDN, but it was over HTTP instead of HTTPS, versus this is not the server I own, and it's unauthorized content like that. And then there's this bucket of 3 question marks. Not 1, 3. So since you have a library, it's extremely easy to automatically add all this information to your header. So your headers library automatically does this for you if you turn on the feature. But this is pretty epic right here. That's just good to know. Now you want to massage the data a little bit before you drop it into your big data thing. So blocked URI, it's not very important. What's more important is the blocked host. You might have a million different URIs for a blocked host. And that data kind of gets muddied together. What you want to know is, holy crap, I'm loading a ton of resources from this one host that I don't want it to. It'll just stick out much easier than reports. Same thing with document URI, document host. Not as valuable as the application name, but maybe. But then also the path. So what web pages for a given host, whether it's prefixed with www or not, they pick the most. Really, this is just all about turning a bunch of reports that would be disparate into something you can actually categorize and use. Violated directed violation type. This is silly, but script source self is useless. Script source is useful. You can group all these things together. This is also important because various browsers will do various manipulations of these values. Firefox, for example, adds port numbers to everything. Sometimes, and for certain reasons, I don't understand. But again, all I care about is that this was a script violation. User agent to browser. This means nothing. That means something. We don't know how to parse user agents in our head automatically, so let's have some tools do them for us. This is the biggest problem with CSP reports, is there is a ton of noise. And this is directly from that blog post because they're basically summed up somewhere we were doing on a very inefficient manner. So the document URI must match the subdomain of the report it was sent to. So, if you're on biz.yelp.com, you want to report it to yelp.com. But if you're using some crazy Russian proxy that's proxying Yelp for you, which happens all the time, your document URI will be different. The craziest thing is they're proxying the website and the headers. Just strip the headers and probably make it work better. And as soon as you start enforcing these things, these proxies can't do this anymore. Blocked URI and source file must start with HTTP. This is because a lot of plugins, a lot of random features will put in your blocked URI. There's a web view, there's I can't even list them out, but these are all the things that are not actually URIs. They're protocols with useless information, so they're completely useless. So they pretty much filter them out, unless it's blank, which indicates an inline JavaScript thing. These two rules alone will probably do 80% of the work that needed, and one change as opposed to 3 weeks of changes. This is our horrible filter. It's much more succinct. It's much more, a lot more stats, but it's also pretty much useless. But I'm hoping these stats can be useful. I'll give the information back to W3C and the browser vendors. Be like, look, this is all the crap we're seeing. This is how often we see it. Can you please fix this? Then you get to watch graphs. Squiggly lines that change and have different colors are really cool to watch. So what we do for every application is we have a set of squiggly lines that indicate the classification. I don't know what that one was, but considering there's 1K per minute, something's probably going on.
What program is it you open?
This is homegrown big data. We also use a few other tools. The best tool for CSP is Splunk, hands down, but there are open source alternatives. Reports by type, these are all the different types of reports. Immediately you're like, so first of all, connect source means an AJAX request. Why am I making so many AJAX requests to an unauthorized host? It turns out in this case it was just a misconfiguration of the CSP. We changed it, that number dropped down to close to 0. But if you see spikes in this information, you might want to check it out. You might want to actually alert on these things. So we're only looking for script source jumps specifically because those indicate XSS or unwanted JavaScript, which is the biggest threat we're trying to prevent. So if we see, this is a long query, but I'll just sort of summarize what it says. If the current minute is more than 10 times, is getting 10 times more report than the average over the last 3 hours, send me an alert. This has been pretty useful, but full disclosure, we have not caught an ongoing XSS attack. We might have been able to catch the TweetDeck attack, but it didn't have CSP at that point. I don't want to say for sure. If anyone didn't know, there was an XSS worm on TweetDeck where you could basically just see a tweet and then you would retweet that. Obviously, that grew up pretty quickly. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was enough to where people outside of the security and TweetDeck realm were like, what's going on here? We might have been able to catch that at that time. So, again, it's the open source alternative. I forget if this has any Twitter garbage on top of it, but this is Logstash. It gives you not as pretty graphs, but most importantly, it allows you to search on all these fields we've indexed. Gives you quick statistics. You can hit score to drill down. Remember, since we made all the data very similar, all we have to do is look for numbers that look, that looks strange. I should investigate. It allows you to answer questions like, give me the inline script reports for Twitter, app name Twitter, classification inline JavaScript. Did you have a question? What kind of violations happen the most? You can classify on the script source or whatever. What pages generate the most violations? This is all sort of useful questions you can answer, but to be honest, this is our investigation strategy. Just click a bunch of shit until something stands out, and that's probably something you're going to want to change. And if you hadn't noticed the little now hiring signs that are sort of randomly placed all over, if you don't want to click a bunch of shit and that doesn't seem like an ideal job, otherwise come talk to me. But that's a lot of build, all that stuff. Guess what? The guy who wrote the plugin for Chrome also wrote the CSP report aggregator. I've been working with him like kind of closely, and it looks pretty good. Generates the statistics per type, does the classifications for you, all kinds of searching tools. And this is something that's incredibly powerful, is these filters. Remember, I talked, there's so many filters you're going to have to write. You could write these in the UI right there, and just automatically start filtering your reports. The number one hurdle beyond removing inline JavaScript here is managing reports. You have a solution. Try it. All right, so now we're at the last bullet point. This is where we talk about winning. So on your checklist, did you ensure only compliant code was introduced? Did you provide tools to allow the owners of these applications to manage these policies yourself? You don't want to be going into 100 application managing policies. Give an easy way for the developers to do it themselves. Onto the reports, build a case. Whatever your goal was, you're going to get to a point where it's like, all right, it's time to flip a switch on something. You're going to start enforcing this head that came up with. But you're going to go into all your log stash and your graph tools. You're going to look at these graphs and you're going to give them this magical, invisible piece of paper that says, like, yeah, chill. Let's do this. Again, your employees are your victims. And then gradually turn the dial from 0 to 11. Remember the feature toggle thing I talked about? Twitter has a little more granular one that allows you to do things percentage-wise. Okay, so go to 10% of users, so go to 100% of users, or to go to 0% of users. You definitely want sort of an out-of-band thing, because it takes like 2 hours or 3 hours to deploy Twitter, so like that's a big problem. Twitter's broken in 3 hours. And then you profit. I mean, every list like this has to have profit at the bottom, so. So I already talked about like how CSP sucks with inline reports. I'm going to get a little ranty for a little bit. And then it actually pissed me off enough where I made this little CSP fingerprint app. If you could visit that URL, I wish I could have got a domain for it, I'm sorry. If you have an iPhone or you're on Mac with Chrome, please know we have plenty of those reports. But I've been asking people to visit this page to sort of see how things look from the given browsers. So if you have inline JavaScript, this is what you get, either a blank or a self value. Is that eval? Is it inline JavaScript? Is it an on-click handler? I don't know. There's a current thread right now on the web AppSec mailing list. I would love it, and we would just jump on there and be like, yeah, we need to put in inline script violation, eval, on-click, etc. This is useless. Script sample. This is something that only Firefox sends. This looks pretty useful. That's an eval call. That's some inline CSS. That's an inline JSS. And that's an on-error attribute. Crazy useful, right? It got shut down in the W3C group because of privacy concerns. You might have a private value inside of your JavaScript. Whatever. Either way, Firefox only limits it to 45 characters, so it's basically useless unless you have something like that. Usually you're starting with like the common JavaScript that makes like an asynchronous load, like parentheses function. By that time you've already used up all your characters, so you have no idea what you're seeing. 9 times out of 10, these inline script violations come from plugins. You don't have information on what plugins you have installed. LastPass loves to inject inline JavaScript, loves to DDoS like our CSP report. We filter like that out. But you can get that information from script sample. So it's just kind of a very difficult task to sort of understand what's going on in inline JavaScript. You can never reproduce these things for the most part, unless it's like a tweet that XSS form. This is how I would pretty much summarize what I found from 3 days of collecting CSP reports. 3 days is definitely long enough to make declarative statements, right? So we're not in a happy state, and we need to fix this. I sort of talked about this. This is sort of something people have been kicking around. This is definitely more invasive. But since every plugin violates whatever CSP you have, pretty much, you can start to fingerprint these plugins. Firefox, again, gives us much more information. It's much more easy to determine whether or not this is a plugin or not. If it's a plugin, that means we can't ignore it because we can't do anything about it. But I hope to sort of come up with some kind of database that you can then put a CSP report through and it goes, yes, this is a plugin, no, it's not. But obviously, that is much more invasive, especially if you have very interesting plugins installed. So we're going to have another dog. Picture of Husky here. The Husky's sad because a lot of people don't CSP. Make her happy, please. And this is the part where I just dump a bunch of URLs, and then people pull up the phone and try to go to a bunch of them. CSP is a Twitter account. It's me. I only tweet about CSP. Most of the retweets of what other people are doing. Every once in a while, I get on soapbox and rant. CSP Playground is really cool. It allows you to test, like, understanding CSP on a live website. If you make a few configuration changes, and the server spits back a different policy that you can see the effect of, like on a live website. It's really cool. And they also have a list of amazing resources that I stole and have from. CSP is awesome. It's not only true, but it's a site that will let you sort of generate headers for yourself. Like you say, oh, I do this, this, and this. It's like, well, here's the header you should apply. SecurityHeaders.com is a website you can use to scan your site to see what headers are present. This is more for like full coverage of security headers, but it has stuff for CSP too. And then caniuse.com/content security policy will show browser support. Browser support is really good except for IE. IE does not support content security policy, it does not support strict transport security, but they are currently working on it and it's supposed to be in IE 12. So that whole argument of like CSP isn't well supported is gone. I think it was gone as soon as Chrome and Firefox did it, because that's like 75% of our visitors, but a lot of sites require IE still. So that's like all the information I could possibly think of that I dumped on here. I might have forgot a few things, but this is the part where you ask questions.
There's a Kenny's tool, right? From Jesse.
Yes.
So build your rules, I guess, CSP corrections.
Yeah, it works as a proxy that then learns what your CSP would be just based on what's coming back and forth in the proxy. So it'll look for those third-party URLs, it'll look for all that stuff, and give you a policy. I actually haven't used it. You use it?
Use it professionally.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Awesome. Works pretty well. So, was anyone going to go to CSP now? One person raised their hand one time I gave this talk, and I was just like, yes! Like, he's already raised. There you go. Yeah, you're fine.
Here.
Richard, go ahead.
All right. What do you think about the privacy issues? I guess posted like 2 weeks ago about Facebook and CSP and messages querying.
They have a solution for that.
Did you read about it, or what do you think as far as privacy issues? Just how I guess HTTPS is wild in a sense, with leaks information.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, that information is being leaked in 10,000 other ways. I mean, they definitely don't want to add a security feature that introduces a privacy problem. So they do have a solution for that. Essentially, it won't allow you to perform redirects on images, which is, I think, how they detect it if you're logged in, whether you got a 302 or not. So now there's this whole thing that if I load a resource, and I don't explicitly say that you can allow redirect in the case, it just won't redirect and won't give you the yes or no information. Nobody's using it right now, nobody's implemented it, but it's in the spec for CSP level 3.
How are the results looking for your Roku test?
Well, I sort of showed how awful they were with like no distinction that works across every browser to determine what actually happened. Like, the results are exactly what I expected. We're in an awful state, and it's really hard to do. Like, there was a concern, so the proposal was to add something like, inline in the script or eval or whatever, and it was like, oh no, but then it's not a URI. Well, back in the real world, it's a public unauthenticated endpoint, so you're doing validation anyways, right? And again, browsers send so much data, so much garbage to that, it's just pretty ridiculous. Cool, thanks.